Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of OHKO, a Pokémon VGC podcast. A couple of changes going into this week, but it's going to be a fun time. I'm out traveling. It's the last week of the podcast for Joe Brown for the next month. And the biggest news of all, we have none other than Scott Glaza joining us this week. Scott, how you doing?
Doing great. Excited to be here. I studied up all day on your past podcasts, so I feel like I'm an expert now. I hope there'll be a quiz later.
Oh, yeah. Oh man, wouldn't that be crazy if we come up with the help of our Discord, we come up with like an OHKO quiz? That's a great idea, Scott. That's why they pay you the big bucks.
I will not actually succeed at this quiz, so I'm excited for the guest that has to deal with it. Yeah.
No, the real question, how many podcast guests have we had on the podcast whose names start with J? The first question.
Because it's a lot.
Oh no.
We got Jake Muller.
We end the episode right now if you get this wrong. No. Like,
oh shoot. Yeah, it feels like it's a much larger number than I want to guess.
It's got to be like 8 or 9, right? If we're counting Justin and Jake twice and James Beck twice, that's 6 right there.
Well, I feel like doubling's cheating. I was going to say like 5, but
they were different numerical episodes though that they appeared in. What would the Bulbapedia page
two
say?
different Justins. We've had Joe. We've had James. We've had both Jameses, so we actually 6. Who am I forgetting? I know, like, I'm forgetting somebody off there, but yeah, there's at least 6 different J's. So, all right, well, we'll just keep going because honestly, I'd feel bad if we brought you all this way, and we're not gonna. But I'm keeping an eye on you getting that quiz wrong. But no, real reason we wanted to be able to bring Scott on this week. We wanted to be able to talk about, kind of just this world of Pokemon broadcasting, the old days now, and just kind of have some fun, kind of reminiscing a little bit. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm excited for this week, Joanne.
Yeah, this is our white whale. That for anybody who doesn't know, I forget what's the name of the book with the whale. I forget, but like he's out in the ocean trying to catch the whale the whole time. Whatever that one is, I think we all had to read
Dick.
it. Yeah, there you go. That one we had to read that in school. I definitely read through all those pages. But Scott's our white whale here because when we were just a small fledgling little podcast with maybe like 5 or 6 episodes. We were at the Peoria Regional Championships. Shout out to Peoria, the best. And Scott made a joke. He's like, hey, maybe I could come on your podcast someday. And ever since then, we've been trying to make this work. And it's taken like half a year to get this to work. But finally, best birthday present ever. So we can have Scott on this week. Like Sierra and I have been waiting for this moment for quite a long time, Scott.
Glad I could make it. I'm always so easy to schedule with, so it definitely wasn't my fault.
Yeah, according to the viewers, this is your first time we reached out, and you're here. We weren't supposed to do this like 2 months ago,
Yeah, I think that's my canon also. So yeah, I'm sticking with that.
I like how the first thing that happens is just like you're throwing Scott under the bus. Like, this is going to be a really successful podcast episode. Like, how dare you deprive the viewers after all this time? This is all right. I'll get the ball rolling with not kind of throwing the guests under the bus here because I do definitely appreciate you joining us. But we'll start off with the light one. Pokemon broadcasts have been done for the summer. Everyone goes back to kind of enjoying their life, working on their non-Pokemon stuff. Like, have you gotten up to anything fun? Like, how's life been for you?
Yeah, I wish I had non-Pokemon stuff, right? It's like, oh no, just have more time for my other Pokemon stuff. I've been trying to enjoy the summer a little bit, just the Final Fantasy concert last weekend. That was kind of cool. I got a few other hobbies, not a whole lot, but, I've been played approximately 100 million hours of Final Fantasy 14 since EUIC.
Nice.
I think I've gotten worse at Pokemon just by all of my brain power has gone into mindlessly grinding MMORPGs. So it's fine. You got a month before Worlds to get it back together. But yeah, been a huge nerd, I guess.
I love that. Scott and I, Sierra, if you don't know, Scott and I actually, we text back and forth quite a lot about the different Final Fantasies. Not necessarily the MMO, because I don't play that one, but with Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 and stuff, that's, it's fun to have common interest with one of your heroes, you know what I mean?
I will say you might have enjoyed some of it more than me, by the way, Joe. It was a very aggressive Final Fantasy 16 slant. It's like, oh yeah, that was one of the Final Fantasies, huh? Wasn't it?
Yeah, that's, I don't know if it's appropriate for a podcast, but some of their thieves was like, Japan, you might want to rewrite the script because I don't think you think you're hitting it where you think you are.
Yeah, that was it. It was great though. We had a pipe organ in the was it Benaroya Hall, I believe, is the venue in Seattle. So you could hear like Dancing Mad actually using the like physical pipe organ. So that was kind of a bucket list nerd thing for me. So awesome. No complaints. Life's okay.
Nice. Glad to hear. Even if you still have like Pokemon stuff going on.
Sierra and I are in a thunderstorm right now. If you ever hear any of our stuff in the background, where we're located, so just wanted to let the audience know because I hear it from my end right now. So sorry, Sierra. Just wanted to let everyone know if they hear that we're currently in a massive thunderstorm.
You're good. But throw the groove. I was like, I'm sure we're going to talk about Pokemon broadcast stuff. So I still have Pokemon stuff. Talking about the World Championships coming up soon, and it seems kind of crazy. I mean, I feel like I've been involved with Pokemon for a decent little chunk of time now, and that doesn't really have anything on those who have kind of like built the way through like the Pokemon broadcast and stuff. Now we're approaching this World Championships in Hawaii. This is returning to Hawaii since like where it's been. Like, I don't know, like this is really cool to see like how big everything has gotten in terms of this broadcasting world and how much the game has grown in overall.
Yeah, I think it's for me, it's gonna be really fun to go back to Hawaii. It's a different island, but like the 2012 World Championships, the last time in Hawaii was pretty memorable for me. It was the one year I competed as a player. I got the invite other times, but broadcast instead. And that was like, it was really like kind of a formative Pokemon experience for me. I think that was kind of like definitely my best weekend as a player. Like I did okay in the tournament, but it was more just like you went there in the field and kind of like I hung out with Ray as he was winning his last World Championship. And it was kind of like neat to get to be around that. But then also I got a text message Sunday morning from Evan Latt, who was just like, boy, this broadcast, not so good, right? We got to fix this. Like, do we? But we ended up obviously, doing what we could on the fan side. Like, maybe someday Pokemon will, consider going the fan route and trying to broadcast. So we did a lot of, sketchy, mid 2010s internet broadcasts, and with all of the technical fun that presented. And then, wound up getting pulled in much more quickly than we expected to. But I think it'll be fun to go back, right? Where and not only was it, the last time I played, so the year I jumped to staff, but I think also, there was like 64 VG Masters or something at that point where there's, literally 10 times that now.
Yeah, honestly, like it's crazy to see how big the World Championships have gotten. But want to go back to kind of talking about like this broadcast and kind of like what comes up next after that, because for a lot of people that maybe kind of joined in, started playing Pokemon during COVID when there's a little bit more time, kind of playing with the new generation games, there has always then been this official broadcast for these internationals, or even when, depending on when you joined in, even for all the regionals, but like wasn't always the case. Like if you try and go back, it was a very different like world back then for this broadcasting.
Yeah, I think especially go back I'm going to use the very beginning incorrectly here. But if you go back to what I think of as the very beginning, right? I think there's like some slight dispute if 09 or 10 was the first year of VGC. And, there was the showdown thing the year before that. But like 2010 for me, the first time that Worlds was in Hawaii is kind of what I think of as like the first real year, as the year Ray got his first World Championship. And, the way we watched this one, there was nothing official. There wasn't really anything coming from Pokemon at all, other than the Tom parent stuff used to get posted online. So you could follow the pairings round around, but then there were no updates until it updated again when the next round was posted. The only reason we got anything was, I believe it was Dr. Fidget. He had a higher end phone back when that was more uncommon. So he was shakily just holding his phone up, streaming it to, all 7 of us on the internet. And 100p or whatever. And that was our stream that year. And I think there's probably a few of us like me, right? I was like, well, I got to get in the venue because this is great. And I appreciate him doing this, but I'd like to see. But it was a kind of a momentous moment, right? Where at that point, Japan had really felt unbeatable. I think probably not too many people would ever argue against the idea that kind of every year Japan's sort of the group of players to beat. But I think back then, I just like felt like it couldn't be done. I think Ray got a little lucky that year, where I think Ray was definitely the best player in the field in 2011 and 2012. 2010, maybe he was just the most fortunate player in the field. But it was really cool to get to see that. And then I ended up going to the event the next year, even though I didn't play. I got 17th at U.S. Nationals that year when I needed to get 16th to make it into cut, and then lost in the last round of LCQ. But it was cool just to kind of be there too, where there's still no stream in 2011, but I'm kind of just getting to see kind of like the like how different Worlds was back then, where like, I like understandably, players always like a little bit more organization on our side, and kind of like the tournaments run a little more smoothly because we all want things to be perfect all the time. But like, it was a traveling circus back then. It felt like on the fan side, right? Where it's just like everything's a little messy, and like VG really did kind of feel like a side event, even though I don't think Pokemon ever felt that way. And yeah, it's just incredible how different things are now, where, got this big official stream and, so many more players and so many more judges even, right? Where I think back then, it's like Poke parents and the TCG side just doing their best to help us have an event where it's great now when you think about it, where there's so many players that from that point started their careers, had a bunch of great tournaments, maybe played some Worlds themselves, and nowadays are judges where I kind of get to see a lot of people go through that whole cycle. I think that's been really cool.
Yeah, I think the huge glow up that the scene has gotten, it's kind of in tandem with as our circuit improved, and as our streams improved, and as our audiences, and player base improved. It's like it's all kind of in unison. And I think you're one of those people that has a unique perspective of playing back in the day. And you hear it a lot in other old games where they say, "Oh, it was so much better in season 2 of League of Legends is so much better with the IEMs and the old system." And Melee was so much better when we were in this dude's garage with 20 people instead of on a big stage, and everybody knew each other's name and everyone helped each other out. Like, so you have a lot of nostalgia for some old esports, like how Pokemon started in the mid 2000s into the World Championships, starting leagues for VG near 2009, 2010. And I wonder your perspective, seeing how it is now versus how it was back then. Do you miss how small or well knit the game used to be? It felt like everybody knew each other, or do you prefer how much bigger it is now?
I think you presented both sides of it pretty well there, because some of the best memories I have still, right? Where it was so cool back then, where I think people were really close. I think one element maybe to touch on too, like especially like my first event was 2010 U.S. Nationals. And I did not go to play, right? I had never played double battles before. I played I played in a little bit for Journey Across America. I'd never played modern double battles before, where there's a lot of mechanic changes between generations 3 and 4. But I literally got a team from Huiha in line, and I played against Chaos, the Smogan owner, in line. I think he'd never played before either. And I was with they hang out, right? Where I think my own like competitive backstory is like, I started playing competitively in 2002. And then kind of like in the online communities that eventually would form Smogon, as kind of like longer term staff there before I got into the VGC thing. So I would just kind of go in to talk to people, right? And I think that was really cool back then, where when there weren't any live tournaments, it was only that mall tour in 2006 that we had so many people where we'd known each other for 7 or 8 years. Like Evan, I would have met online in 2002, didn't meet in person until 2010, and even just getting to that sort of thing was great, right? It wasn't really about the tournament back then for most of us who were attending. I think like there was, there's like 20 or 30 people probably who I think were like really serious about trying to win the World Championships. I think it was more at that point about, hanging out with their friends, seeing the world. There's a big group, there's a poor outdoor bar and restaurant in Indianapolis where I think we probably broke more water glasses than we ordered drinks. And I'll always feel bad for them. I think they went under in unsavory situations eventually, so maybe I don't feel that bad for them. But it just, that's kind of how it was back then, right? It was just all kind of as a means of hanging out. I think that was really cool. And again, especially coming from the small gun background, I thought it was really great to get to do that and kind of meet people in real life that I normally wouldn't have. But like on the tournament side, yeah, I think it's not close, right? Where I do think that like the circuit being so much more complex now is really cool. Where I think the people who make it deep really deserve it. I will never forget watching some of the matches there as I was starting to figure doubles out and realizing that the competitors maybe weren't quite of the same level of practice that they are nowadays, right? And I think like the final matches of tournaments like tended to be pretty good back then, but like, you know, the early top cut, especially like Swiss, like who knows what you're going to see, right? And sometimes back then, even the people would make worlds that just like weren't that experienced. And like I think, you know, the players were just as smart and clever as the players nowadays are, but they just didn't get the battle testing that they did back then, right? Where you know, I think one reason why I think Ray is maybe scarier than anyone realizes is that, you know, he was kind of like, you know, the Pokemon equivalent, you know, his meme in sports about playing against plumbers. Except somehow he was still Michael Jordan level, right? Or like, imagine if he got to practice against people who knew what they were doing. Where I think there's merits both ways, but
right, like people say, Babe Ruth just ate hot dogs and was fat. Like, okay, but imagine if Babe Ruth had a 24-hour workout fitness program, and how many more home runs he would have hit, right? Same argument.
Yeah, I think so, and like, I think it's a shame that we didn't have more people, I guess, who could have played like in the old days and stuck around. But I've really enjoyed watching the development of the people who did play back then and kind of how they've had to adapt to this era where, you know, both getting to watch a lot of them grow up, since obviously it's mostly people are quite a bit younger than me who are still competing now. And, you know, I'm like a weird uncle to a lot of them. But I think also just like, you know, like if all the players back then were just as good as they are now, you know, maybe they kind of like cap out their skills faster and like a more similar progression to players nowadays. But like, well, they kind of learned as they went along, right? And like, I'm sure, you know, they kind of like mislearned a lot of things because, you know, the meta was not as developed as well, and you know, some of the choices that we were all making was a little crazy. But it's been fun to see the whole thing as it went along.
I feel like too, like a really big part of kind of like that skill progression throughout things is just the access to information. Like I was involved with TCG way before like I knew competitive double battles was even really a thing. But like that was always kind of like the conversation because people would get better and they would release articles and they would release videos kind of describing things. And it makes that information that then like a top player, this top mind or whatnot has discovered, well, all of a sudden somebody doesn't have to go through that same effort to find that out. And then they can kind of like elaborate on that. And I feel like that's something too that we've gotten to see through VGC. I joined in through the information era, but like watching back on the old matches, like if you don't really have that information available online at all times, like you're not going to grow nearly as fast. Like isolated ideas, it's just so different if you don't actually have that information on how other people perceive the game.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up too, because I think I probably missed this element of talking about Evan when you started to start commentating, right? But like you know, the reason why I got that tactic is we very recently at that point, within a few months, made Nugget Bridge, you know, now defunct VGC website, but like solving that problem was like exactly what we were thinking, where we were kind of just thinking through, like, well, why do we think that the Japanese player base is so much better than we think that North America or Europe is? Because at that point, it was really just those three regions competing. And one of the things that we thought was like, well, I think not only do Japan have the advantage of having like locals, basically, especially in like the Tokyo area where they're getting to play against each other more, but also it was the Japanese blogs that we thought might be a big part was the difference. And like, I think a few of us who are a little ahead of the meta in the West would, you know, be Google translating the Japanese blogs, and I'm sure keeping all of the nuances. We did so with the fantastic 2012 automatic translation tools. But
I'm sure that was absolutely fantastic information at some point. Like,
yeah, it's just so good. Yeah, it's you know, I can recognize a lot of Pokemon move names that I cannot actually tell you what the word means, but I know that one's Fire Blast. I don't know why, but I know these moon runes. But I think one of the things that was kind of cool about that is that you're like, okay, well, how do we get players on our side to do that? And it's kind of what I really started falling in love, I think, with the community, where I couldn't believe how many people were just like really excited about collaborating and kind of just like helping build this whole thing. And I think, you know, there's so many people from that era have stuck around. I think that's kind of why, right? Where a lot of them, even if they don't like really compete anymore, you know, they'll show up and kind of like, you know, talk to people at the events. Maybe they'll play a couple rounds, maybe they won't. But I just kind of like, I think everybody kind of like felt like they were pulling the rope the same way and kind of like forged those bonds. Like, yeah, it'd be really cool to see what VGC could become. And like, I don't think we could have done it on the fan side. Like, I don't think Pokemon could have done, you know, what or could have made VGC what it's become without so many of us on the grassroots side, kind of community building. And I would never have believed that things could be the size they are now if you told me a decade ago.
Now, one of the things that you, sorry, I was going to say, one of the things you mentioned that you're like, I maybe started talking to Evan in 2002, but we didn't meet until 2010. I think a lot of people don't actually know that old history of VGC. So I think for a lot of our viewers, that's like a surprising thing to hear. So we know the early days of VGC, now that started, but I'm talking the early days of competitive Pokemon. We're only a couple years into the existence of the Pokemon franchise, and you're playing, creating these forums online and these like group chats, or these chat rooms or whatever, just trying to create a sense of a competitive environment. So is this Gold and Silver? Is this Ruby Emerald, or Ruby Sapphire Emerald? Like how did the quote unquote competitive element of competitive Pokemon really start up?
Yeah, so I mean, I got in for Gold and Silver. Like the first simulator would have been for Red and Blue. I think it's Porygon's Big Show. Whereas like all online based, there was no like moveset validity, so you had to be careful where you'd run into Electrode sporing all your dudes a little bit too much, which are not
like
sleep spore exist in Gen 1. Some sleep move, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would have started in Gen 2 where which I think was like the worst simulator era from a intimidating like way to get in sort of standpoint, where so we were all on a IRC, which if you haven't used it, I think people would lovingly refer to it as multiplayer notepad, but it's pretty close, right? Where it's just all text chat, where it there's no design to it at all, and at that point the simulator is just a bot, right? Where you use a command, you'd have a team, and then it'd just all be text based. If you're attacking, it's like, okay, well I got Pikachu out in the field. Pikachu's first move is Thunderbolt, so I'm gonna hit !! space 1 and DM that to the bot, and then it uses Thunderbolt, and like the battle would take place like in a public channel. And at that point, you'd see all the battles happening at the same time. There's like 4 people playing at once, maybe. It's a very different game. I got into it like really late in Gen 2, I think, thankfully. I think it's obviously at this point, I guess, for anyone who's like really new, it's all 6v6 singles back then, right? We didn't really have any meaning, like we literally didn't have doubles until Generation 3. Yeah. And then even at that time, I mean, it's funny now, as I think I'm probably one of the people most associated with the VGC program, but one of the programmers for the first good simulator, I would say, like the one, like actually there's a graphic user interface, Masamune XGP. I was like the first guy like really like doubles, and like programmer types always seem to really like doubles, right? I think there's more like perceived creativity in it. So I think that sort of person always seems to get attracted to that and like usually playing non-standard stuff. By the time we all made fun of him, right? Like double battles, like it was a joke game mode. Like, what are you doing, dude? And then we played Journey Across America in 2006. Like, no, we were right. This is a terrible game mode. But they fixed it for Generation 4. Nobody told me that. That's why I got a little bit late. But yeah, I mean, we're just not only were we having our janky simulator back then too, but like everybody just spread over different websites, right? Where like like sites like IGN and Game FAQs had their own kind of like sub communities, and then you'd wind up on IRC and they'd have their own sub chats. Like there were a few Pokemon specific sites which I think tended to, in retrospect, generate better players. I was a Game FAQs guy myself, but like even though I started in Generation 2, would have been kind of like more one of the core Generation 3 guys. And yeah, that's good enough. I think I would love to be that age again with like a more modern community, see how good I could be. Where like I think at that time, I think I was a stronger Gen 3 OU player probably than I ever was in VGC, just because that was at the point where like I was like really trying my best and like pushing myself. Where I think the first time I went to a live like modern tournament, I was like 21 in 2010, right? So it's like a little past kind of like wanting to kind of go in on that sort of hobby. And I think I was always sort of the sort of person who was like destined to be on the media side. But yeah, I mean, like I think it's been cool for me, right? Because not only did I get to see to an extent this whole program develop, I missed like the first 2 seasons where like I was a little sour about how the 2006 tournament that Nintendo put on went. But I get to see most of the progression of competitive Pokemon altogether, where I really only missed like Gen 1 and then the middle of Gen 2. Maybe one other thing that's funny to note too is that, I remember when Generation 3 came out, we were all so sure the Pokemon brand was ending. Very clearly at a downturn. Nothing like it was during Generation 1. And there's probably not even going to be a Generation 4.
was the best gen of Pokemon as well. How could y'all think that? That was peak Pokemon.
We did read there was a large quantity of water in those games. But yeah, I mean, like...
you could argue too much water.
Yeah, so I've heard. But I mean, it's funny, right? Where it's like we could not have been more wrong about the way that things were going to develop. And I think in a fun way, that's kind of how I remember the progression of the community in general, right? Where we were probably wrong about pretty much every Pokemon and pretty much every strategy at some point. And I think that's what makes games like this great, right? Where like, I love learning about what we were wrong about and why, and then like kind of trying to, make better guesses next time, and then not doing that, being wrong again. And, I've been at this for like 20 years now. I'm sure anytime now I'll have it figured out.
I want to go back to, because you're talking about like too that if you're playing, it was kind of like you're destined for like that more media side of things. And I want to talk about like kind of like the older days of the broadcast, because obviously no matter how technology advanced it was, somebody's phone off an event is not like it when we're looking at the broadcasting end of things. So like you're looking at the broadcast, it's not quite there. There's Nugget Bridge. You have this like type of information. Like, what were like kind of the first steps to start pushing towards like getting this information like a little bit more out there? Because especially at the time, technology isn't quite the same as it is now. The information isn't the same. Even just the event space themselves isn't the same. So like, what was like that first step to being able to try and create the first bricks, the foundation we have today?
Yeah, so I guess it's like there's kind of two ends of it, right? There's one is that like on like the information sharing side, I think the main point of reference we had was Smogon. And I think like whatever else positive or negatively people think of, like especially at the time Smogon's community, like what they built with all the analyses is unbelievable, right? Where I don't know if there's any game on the internet that kind of has like just the volume of information that they had. So I think trying to emulate that a little bit for VGC while also not wanting to take the same approach. I think Smogon at the time is really just the analyses for like informational stuff, right? So I think critically, one thing that they did that we did not want to do is they went Pokemon by Pokemon, right? And I think in single battles, that makes a little bit more sense, right? This is this Pokemon's role on the team. This is what you want to try to do. If this happens, do this. The problem with VGC is that it doesn't really work that way, right? There's always a pairing of Pokemon on both sides, and like, I'd love to protect this Pokemon, but like in some games, the right move is this Pokemon is the hero. I have to protect it at all costs. In other games, if I can trade one for one, that's wonderful. And I think the team context of that is really important. So we really wanted to go for like the team report approach on that end to both to try to make things make a little more sense, but then also because I think what we'd all really loved about experiencing, several years of maybe like online single battle Pokemon versus our first experiences in person at the tournaments was as the tournament experience, right? Where it just feels so different to like actually physically be there in a building. The nerves are a lot higher. I think just like being there with your friends, whether you win or lose, it's very different, right? And we wanted to make sure that people at a venue to kind of explain like, well, it's great because of all of this, right? Like, it's not just that I won or that I did well. It's that like I got to experience this thing in Pokemon that at the time that none of us really imagined was possible. And then we kind of built on that. I think the broadcast side, it's a little bit different, right? Where up until the point where you would have first seen Evan and I on camera in 2013, there'd really only been two major official broadcasts that I'm aware of tournaments. It would have been the finals of Journey Across America, which, is US only. It is US only, not North America only, because Scarm, a Canadian, won an event and then got DQ'd for being Canadian. So nice. Journey Across the United States of America. And that was it's a very different show, right? Where it's more like a variety show feel. They literally had a esteemed wrestler Hulk Hogan on there, providing live commentary as we go.
Good KO, brother.
Yeah, he saw. I think the one I'll remember as long as I live is I think Snorlax used Body Slam, and he just like freaked, like, Body Slam. That must be the best move in the game. It's not quite Hulkster, but it was an experience we'll never forget. And then there was I think it's what GameStop did a stream in 2012, And I think that VOD still exists. I used to watch it a lot more. That's kind of how I avoided getting nervous for official broadcasts, where it's like, all right, these people, they did their best, but they're in way over their heads. There's some things they get wrong mechanically, where we've always thought they probably read an article that Chalky had posted on Nugget Bridge about 2 weeks before that World Championships, where he was writing about Journey Across of America, which was Generation 3, because they mentioned some mechanics incorrectly on stream that would have been correct in Generation 3 and were mentioned in the article. So I do feel a little bad for them now that I'm older. It's like they clearly tried to do the research, but we made Nugget Bridge was 6 weeks old at that point. So we didn't have a whole lot of help for them available to figure stuff out at that point. We are not the most camera savvy people in the world. I think especially me when I was younger. I didn't have any sort of media experience. At least Evan had done radio. And then there'd been a lot more broadcasting up the TCG side too, as well, where even though he was not on the 2013 World Championships, I think especially Kyle Sukovic's work with the Top Cut, I think led to the TCG side seeming more viable. But yeah, I think the one thing we lost, I wish there was more of, and I guess there's stuff like the VGC World Cup now, but I think where we really get our practice on the Nugget Bridge side is we used to host a lot more invitationals. At the time I was still living in Michigan, so I was on East Coast time, and there was a lot of broadcasting at 3-4 in the morning when Team USA played against Team Japan and Team Korea. It tended to be a lot of 5v5 or 7v7 stuff, but I thought it was really cool. It was show matches. The broadcasts were tough, where it's one player would have to stream their perspective, and then we would restream that with commentary over the Nugget Bridge channel. So again, the convenience of modern broadcasts cannot be overstated. But it was cool, right? You get to see a lot of players that we don't get to see much. I still wish we did a little more of that sort of thing, right? Where because we get to see the Japanese players a little bit more throughout the year. They're always very excited about kind of the friendly team versus team thing. Pre-YouTube, Aaron Zhang played in a bunch of those. I think he was kind of at the time just a fun upstart senior, right? He'd won the senior national championships twice in a row, but it would have been the year before the famous Rotop match at Worlds, right? So, but I still always remember too. I'm sure both sides were ghosting a little bit, which I don't condone in modern tournaments. It was a little different back then, but Aaron was playing 2010 in one of those show matches, and he had 2 Pokemon with Trick Room out during Trick Room. And we had a very heated argument amongst the Team USA folks about whether he should call the double protect and double Trick Room. And he did not want to do it. And I think Ray talked him into it, and he hit it on stream and took all the credit. So I'm getting the truth out there 10 years later. But that sort of thing was just so much fun, though, right? Where it was fully grassroots. And even though, in the West, with how big the land masses of our countries are, it's harder to do the same sort of in-person stuff Japan does. I think it was kind of our best emulation of that, on top of trying to give people something to watch, right? Where I personally really like this regional stream every weekend, right? I wish I was out there casting myself every time, but it's great that there's a bunch of weekends all year I can put the stream on, I can follow the meta, kind of just enjoy the brand, and that sort of opportunity just didn't exist when I started competing. So it was neat to kind of help start making that happen.
Now, do you ever think about, because this is what I think about all the time, as everyone knows, I'm a Seijun truther, right? I technically watched the U.S. Nationals before it, that July 4th weekend. That was the first event I watched. But what solidified me as a VGC fan was watching Seijun win Worlds. And I think about how that boom happened for the video game, right? And you were right there through it all. If you watch the Little Patricia That Could, there's a very famous line from you in there that says, "Everybody agrees Seijun's the best player that's never won Worlds." And then you set it up perfectly for me. Thank you. I appreciate that line. Really helped me in the script there. But do you ever think about, either in that moment or reflecting now, that it's very likely that either you or Evan or Dwee or Justin Flynn, Shady, any of the older casters, you very well might have been the first person many people have ever seen in competitive VGC. So did that pressure weigh on you, or was it you were appreciative of the position you were able to be in, that the first time I ever watched a match, it was you casting it?
It's funny you ask about that. I mean, that was always the goal, right? Where I think all of us who wound up in broadcasting, right, winning worlds would have, as players, would have been more fun. But like, we always kind of wanted to help be able to be that for someone, and like, it's always I always feel bad when people like come say hi to me at events, right? I'm comically awkward in the meet and greet. But I do like really appreciate when people mention stuff like that, right? Because that was always the point, and it's nice to feel like we succeeded a little bit. I think for me personally, I distinctly remember I was kind of in a tough weekend. I think I had applied to Pokemon for a real job and been turned down at that point. So I think I was just like turbo salty all weekend. And like Sunday morning, I was like, you need to grow up. Like, it's a big moment. I had no idea how big at that point, but I was like, it's time we got to lock in a little bit. I was okay in that match, but yeah, I think it was, I mean, I'm glad I did, right? You can only imagine spending the last 11 years thinking back, probably should have tried a little harder on that Pachirisu game, right? Lucky. But yeah, I mean, like, especially, I think that whole tournament in retrospect is really cool too, right? I think it's probably still my favorite worlds, where I still think Jody's team was cooler than Sejun's was. I know not a whole lot of people are going to agree with me on this, but I think just like both players had such neat meta adaptations to what I thought going into the tournament was kind of like a little boring, like little too. I thought the pool of Pokemon was a little too small, right? Like the cream of the crop was too obvious, and I was kind of expecting a snoozer. And it was very much not what happened. But I think, I kind of mentioned before, I always love when I'm wrong and kind of learning some things. I think that whole tournament for me was like, okay, let's stop underthinking worlds. But yeah, I mean, I think it's cool, right? And like, you mentioned too, the comment I made about Sejun. I forgot saying that until I saw the video. It's like, do I agree with that? Or I just say that for the camera? Like, no, I think I do agree with that, right? Where like he really should have won 2011 Senior Worlds, right? And like, I think choked a little bit against Cams, which, I mean, whatever. He's a literal child at that point. These things happen. But like the year after that, his first year in Masters, like nobody's really taking him seriously, but he went 5-1 in Swiss. The year I did not go 5-1, so went 4-2 and missed cut. And he did, I think he had some stuff on the team too that like now looks really meta, but at the time we all thought was like very clearly wrong. I believe he was the first person to meaningfully use rough skin Garchomp, which we all just thought was like a dumb choice at that point. Like, why would you not use it? Like, what is wrong with this child? And obviously has not aged well as a metagame take. And then, yeah, I mean, 2013, we all saw what he did, right? On top of that, when he qualified in 2011, I believe he was the only South Korean representative because he'd beaten all the Masters and like a mixed age division nationals in order to qualify for Senior Worlds. Yeah, I mean, he's always been super impressive. And yeah, certainly at the time, you never realized like this is going to be, I think, still pretty cleanly the most famous battle in Pokemon history. But it's great to get to be there for it.
I think it's interesting too, because it's like you're talking about like that one line, and it's like that was the narrative then going into it. And I obviously at that point you don't really realize the impact, but I think that's like the really interesting thing about just like broadcasters about the board, like past day and even current day, like we create this narrative like for the players, like we are their voice when they're out here doing the battles, like kind of like what we set that story up to be. Like obviously we're not making stuff up, like we're not just like, oh, Joe Brown's the best VGC player out there and just kind of hoping it sticks. Like we go past this history and what they're accomplishing, and like we tell the story. Like if you've been a part of like some of the biggest moments throughout the history, because looking back at even just quite a few things, like I don't know, it's incredible to see then how fondly like people look back to like those older broadcasts, these players that are still like so infamous for today. Like that's unlike any other. Like you are so far etched into the Pokemon history that it's unreal.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me too, the big lesson I got out of with the 2014 Worlds, I just you never know when the big moment is coming, so you got to be ready every day, right? Where I think, I guess I've always, so I'm not a professional esports broadcaster, right? I'm just a marketer, but I think I was treating it too much like a hobbyist up until that point. I think that was the day it really clicked for me. All right, well, this is not only could this be a big moment for competitive Pokemon, right? But at the very least, like this is a huge moment for these players, and like I kind of owe it to them to make sure I'm doing my best every time. And I kind of grew up a lot that weekend. And I do remember like I think I left DC like Tuesday or Wednesday or something. So I was walking around the Monday afterward, and then I remember I went by the venue. And first of all, it's the first time I'd gone by the venue after everything had like been torn down before. I guess like the weirdest, bizarre experience, right? It was like, wasn't there just it's just a
It was just different yesterday.
Yeah, it's like oh, the magic is gone. But it kind of did hit me, right? Like, oh man, I think it was already kind of starting to spread in a way that I think we'd never seen for anything VGC related before, right? And I think at the time the community was like really small and plucky, and we just like wanted somebody to notice us, and I was starting to realize I was like, oh, man, this might be the first of those moments, right, where we really kind of get appeal outside of the hardcore competitive video game folks, and yeah, it's I'm glad I hadn't thought about that while I still had the microphone. I think that otherwise y'all would have known that I was thinking it.
Are there times like besides Patricia, obviously, like because Gabby had this really great moment on the podcast last week where she talked about I think she said it was 2012 where she watched I forget the play, but it was something like a side attack with the double protect on the other end, right? And that was when the game opened her eyes. It might have been 2010 when she said that, and you're like, oh wow, this game's mechanics and interactions are much deeper than I thought at first, and there's so much more I can grow as a player and as a commentator, was like Gabby's takeaway from that moment. Do you think there were any moments for you in your beginning of your VGC career where either a player made such an insane read against you or you watched a play go down that you were like, wow, this game is so awesome. This game is so much more in-depth than like I even thought just 5 minutes ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a few. I think the first one, which like is a bad answer, so I'm not going to make it the only one. But like for me, like I just never taken doubles as a whole very seriously until 2010 Nationals, right? Where like I said, we'd been memeing it in the very early days, and then Journey Across America kind of sucked, where it just I think the key bad mechanic back then for people who aren't familiar with it is if you knocked out a Pokemon in the middle of a turn, you immediately replaced that Pokemon instead of it being the next turn. So like a lot of like wonky things that weren't very good with like explosion, where you could literally potentially win the game on turn one by double exploding. There's a lot I didn't like about it.
Wait, that's terrible.
What? The old battle revolution strats.
Yeah, and then right? And then during the whole Kogan stream, there was one guy, I think it was like Chalky's, one of his best friends at the time. I forget if he lost in the finals or top four, but he was the first one as a player who would really impress me, right? Where it's like, oh, like no matter how bad this format is, he's doing some cool stuff. I think it was Swords Dance or a different setup move on Groudon, but it was like, okay, well, this is things that we kind of felt like didn't work back then. But the metagame was really quick, and he found a way to slow it down enough that he could kind of boost up and power through people. He ended up losing in like a way that I remember at the time being irritated about. I can't remember what happened anymore, but like, this game is unfair. Doubles is still dumb. And then it kind of just watching matches in the side TVs in Indianapolis and kind of like hearing people talk about the games, and I kind of just realized like, okay, there's a lot more here than I realized, and like I want to be part of this, right? Or I think I misjudged this whole thing. I mean, I feel like to me, it's like every time I lost a tournament match was good for me on that note. I think I'm kind of like one of the people where like I would have driven myself crazy probably if I competed for too long, where I can still tell you what happened in almost every series I've ever lost while I was a player. But like, I think the first one for me is like, okay, I went to my first regional in 2011, and like I got the top 16 pretty easily. I kind of just like felt like I might be cruise controlling to win that one, and the guy played that round, ended up winning the tournament instead, and like he had some stranger Pokemon, and like my game plan just wasn't very good, where like I was doing things that didn't make very much sense, and it's a very winnable game, and it is like maybe the one time when I play, it's like I did just a bad choke, right? It's not good, can't do things like that, and we still had Nick McCord back then, kind of just like being the MC. So he kind of interviewed me like, oh, why'd you lose? Because he also kind of like had the duck shirt on, like, oh, you're supposed to win. Why didn't you win? And like, oh, and it's like, well, he played better than I did, right? It's like I made a lot of bad choices, and like I got to be better next time, right? And like that sort of thing is important. What I should have done then is like, I'm really prepared. I'm going to go to any U.S. Nationals, not NAIC. U.S. Nationals. I'm gonna have a great team. I didn't. So like the Last of Us came out, then played a lot of The Last of Us, played a lot of League of Legends.
Yeah.
Made a team like 2 days before the tournament. I had Life Orb Whimsicott on it, which was one of the Pokemon of all time.
What?
I learned over the course of this tournament that Life Orb Whimsicott does not one-shot Samurott. So I played Samurott twice in Swiss somehow. It did not win either of those games. I got toasted by Samurott twice. I went 5-2. I was the only 5-2. There's the only 2-loss player ever in that era who bubbled out, which is kind of the way things went. But also, I feel like if you lose to Samurott twice, that's like kind of on you, right?
You kind of deserved it, yeah.
I think if you bring Life Orb Whimsicott to a tournament, that's also on you.
Like, yeah, I think so too, right? Yeah, like, okay, yeah, there are things I could have done differently, and then I did, right? So like, I was like, okay, well, this is not going to get it done. And then I really wish I got to play in the World Championships following up, where like at that time there was 4 rounds of LCQ, and then all the juniors and seniors got to make real worlds, but in Masters, like only 4 of you. So some people drew buy cards, so they got to make worlds, and the rest of us had to play off. I believe there were two playoff games. I lost one, and Dwee lost the other. So it's funny in the way Pokemon history played out, right? Like, come on, if anyone deserved the karma. But yeah, I mean, it was funny where that was another one, and we're playing best of 1 at that point until actual worlds. So like, I think things probably play out differently in a best of 3. But like, I'm way ahead, and like, okay, well, the one way that this can go wrong is like I have like Terrakion or Scrafty, I forget which one. I was like, okay, well, he could switch in a Moongus. I could get Effect Spore Slept. That's the only way I can lose this game. Like, I probably just shouldn't attack this slot, because why open the door? Anyway, so that's what happened. And like, like unlucky, but also like, I knew it. I thought about it, and I didn't do it. And like, I think I was saltier at the time, but like, especially because I had a really cool team. It was a bummer. I think I played Ruben and NPA afterward. Both of us using a world team, just like crushed him. It's like, man, can easy imagine a different way. I could not have beaten Ray, so at least I know I wouldn't have won worlds. But yeah, but the whole losing experience is like really good for me, and that was kind of one of the ones, right, where it's like it's the pressure that really made the game interesting to me. So that's a very long-winded answer, but it's like, okay, well, that sort of decision is so interesting, right? We're like, well, I made the higher percentage move and it didn't pay off, and like, when in this game should you make that move, right? And like, was there a different way I could have found a way to close this with 100%? Or like, did I do the right thing and it just didn't work out for me? And like, I think that's always been the end of it I found more interesting. Where like, I mean, I think, again, playing competitive from the beginning, like, I've always read the game pretty well, right? Like that part of it has always made sense to me. And it's just like it's like the relitigating part of it that I've always found interesting, right? Like, well, was this a right choice, a wrong choice, or like, a right choice that didn't work out, or like a wrong choice that did. And like, that was always kind of what got me dug in. It's just that like trying to understand everything that I could understand.
I mean, going back on like moments and stuff too, because you're talking about how like the game and kind of like how it plays out and stuff is something that you kind of like just got to see a little bit better. So that's obviously a super nice skill for a caster to have going into this, because it's no longer just analyzing like your own team, but kind of a board state coming out from 2 players, which could be a little bit more difficult than some kind of envision going from just like an individual like playing aspect as well. But then you said earlier too, you didn't necessarily have like the media background that maybe other people did. So like once you got into that position where you're all of a sudden behind the booth, you're the one casting over these matches now, like how was that transition like for you overall, going from playing to then casting? Like how did you feel on that? Because it's not like there was the most that you could have necessarily gone off of. There's not really too many people you can talk to or like try and learn from in that moment. Like nowadays, like when I hopped into it, I could look back on every other cast and be like, okay, this is what they do. Okay, this is perfect. And you guys didn't really have that back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think not good, right? Or I think I think I very clearly was struggling on the early streams, right? Where it's like I knew stuff, but my ability to convey that was not great often. And like it's like one of the only reasons I feel like it hasn't been as obvious as I've slipped as I've gotten older and older is I can talk better to make up for playing worse. I think some of it they like made. I'd say up front, one thing that made a big difference. I think I wish people understood better how good Evan is. Not just I think the Pokemon side of it. I think he's way stronger than people realize. But I think Evan is very good at making it easy to be an analyst next to him, or like he brings an appropriate amount of energy. Like he's following the game well enough. He gets the plot and will set the person next to him up to not have to make a difficult handoff, right? Just always easy. I think it would have been much harder for me if I had a play-by-play person at that point who like wasn't as good at the media end, even if they were even better at the Pokemon end, just because I never had to like work too hard. Like, oh, that's an interesting point you made. Let's get back to whatever I think is most important to talk about, right? Where like, I mean, it just was always like, okay, well, we're in the right ballpark. I see what we're talking about. I can build on this, and I think for me that helped a lot. I think the other thing that we did that I thought was kind of interesting is like, okay, well, we've never seen a successful Pokemon VGC broadcast, right? So like, well, we got to imagine what that would look like, right? Like what role should we have? What should both of us be doing? And I think so some of the things we did is like, well, we looked at sports. We looked at the other esports that existed at the time. Like again, League of Legends was definitely the preeminent esport at that point. So I think for us, we looked at, I think our favorite duo was Mani and Doa over in Korea at that point. We never quite managed to integrate 30, I think 90-second to 2-minute tangents on Star Wars into our broadcast quite as well as they did. But I'd like to think that we took inspiration from some other things that they did really well. We looked at Prog and D1 and Smash Brothers, who at the time I thought were like really good. I think eventually I realized that all these people's skill levels were a little bit too far beyond mine to really get it. I think the thing that I think the better metaphor for how I think we set up VGC casting is American football, because I think the flow of the broadcast is really similar, where like you've got the play, which takes like 5 seconds, and then 40 seconds of nothing, right? Where it's like, how do you fill this space, right? And unfortunately for me, this was pre-Tony Romo's 1 year of being a good broadcaster, so I didn't have that to draw inspiration from either. But I think that general flow is kind of a thing, right? It's like, okay, well, during the play, we should be explaining what's happening and making sure people are noticing what's important in the moment. And then it's about setting up what's about to happen next. Like, why did what just happened matter? And how does it impact what we're about to see? Why is this decision interesting or challenging for these players? And I think it went okay, right? Or like, I still largely like the system. It's fun to me sometimes when we shift it up a little bit. And like, I think we've blurred the roles a little bit more in a way I think is usually good. But I kind of like, having that backbone to play off of, right? And I think if there's one thing we did really well in the early days, I think we kind of mostly got the formula right, even though I think maybe I in particular wasn't quite skilled enough to play into it.
Yeah, there's so much I want to touch on in that answer, because I think there's no, it's great. I think it makes me excited when you hear you say things like you were inspired by Monty and Doa and other Smash casters, and like even people would be inspired by you guys. And like for my inspirations 100% as a play-by-play caster were from Evan and from Shady Penguin. Like I used to rewatch the national VODs and the world's VODs and everything, and like seeing like what are they doing so well. And that's why I say Evan is the GOAT. Evan, nobody, and not myself, not anyone else, I think to this day can hold up to what Evan was able to accomplish while on play-by-play, like his eloquent word usage and making it entertaining, telling the story. That's where I learned, okay, this is the story. This is not just, we're not just saying attacks that are going off like in the anime, like the announcer, like, oh, Thunderbolt, miss, or whatever, right? Like we're actually connecting and weaving the match together. And that's what Evan was so good at, and Shady was so good at the hype. So that's where I tried to be inspired. So to hear you say you were inspired by others to try to be better is great too. And then your connection to regular sports. People ask us, I'm sure you get asked about commentary advice all the time, and people ask me, and a lot of times I say, if you want to get good at commentary, or if you want to get good at esports, then you have to watch traditional sports. You have to know what is actually working well in that setting, because it's a formula. People want to blend play-by-play and color and back and forth, but it's a formula that has worked for 80 years of broadcasting sports on the radio or television, right? Where the play-by-play says the play that's happening, and then the color analyst describes what just happened or what the state of the game is after that play. And I tell people all the time, watch football. That's the exact sport, just like you mentioned. 10 seconds. I think in a 60-minute game of football, it's only like 12 minutes of actual action. So there's like 48 minutes of just the clock ticking down, waiting for the next play to start.
And Twitch chat says that our streams are the same way.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's kind of like you're watching a Dondozo match, you know, and that's 60 minutes in the round timer and maybe only 10 minutes of actual action go on. So it's just nice to hear that, like, I'm not crazy. You know what I mean? Like, you can get better in your craft by appreciating other kind of similar things. You don't have to copy somebody's flow or copy what they do, but like, watch a hockey game. If you've never watched a hockey game, and see how the broadcaster tells you how the game works and what is happening and who is winning and who's doing the best. Like, actually study the craft of commentary, and that's how you can improve.
Two things I want to say. I mean, one is that last point. Speaking of professional sport broadcasters, I follow the Seattle Kraken, or my local ice sports ball team's play-by-play guy on the platform formerly known as Twitter, and he, before a game once, he showed his notes, and like, he's got, paper that, like, I think only a Dynamax Pokemon could hold. He's written on like size 1 handwriting. The whole thing is just full of notes for that game. Because I guess he doesn't want to flip pages, right? So he's all in front of him. But it's ridiculous, right? Like, it seems impossible. But I thought that was a cool moment for me, where I was like, I'm a clown. Like, this guy is just some random regular season game, and he's done this much prep. I'm like, I watched a couple games on the YouTube. I think I'm ready to cast Worlds. Like, what am I doing? Which, like, that, I thought that was good. But yeah, I mean, I think I want, one other thing you said, I think I want to highlight is, like, yeah, I mean, play-by-play, when it's great, is a lot more than just saying what happened on screen, right? And like, I think, I don't know if, like, sometimes I think when we discuss like how much we like the formula and how much we don't, I can always wonder if we're talking past each other. Because I think, to me, that's the point, right? Like, reading the messages for the audience is not helpful. Like, it might be a little helpful, I guess, if you're vision impaired, or you're playing a game in another window or something, right? But it's like, with adding fun to that, and then also kind of like highlighting the right parts of it with the right intonation, and kind of like like pausing at the right moments where it was actually important. Like, it sets up what happens next, right? And like, for me, my biggest pet peeve as an analyst is like, if I feel like the play-by-play people did not mention something that just happened that was important enough that I have to go back and get it, or wasting time that could be setting up what's happening next. And like, I think that's one thing that Evan and like really all the play-by-play folks on our team now, I think that we've always been way stronger in play-by-play than analysis, I feel like, in the official streams. I think everyone's really good at it, right? And I think it's just so important, because like, you just can't, like, the games go so quickly, right? Even though we do get those 45 minutes, or I wish 45 seconds often, like it's not enough time, right? And I think even then, my casting speaking pace is way too fast, because I'm trying to get too much stuff in there. The first time I went to South Korea, that was the local players was making fun. Oh yeah, you're the caster who talks too fast. Like, thank you. That's a great introduction. No. I'm glad that we can meet each other. But wow. but I thought it was like, even like, if they're making fun of me a little bit, I thought it was like really good feedback, right? It's like, oh, I never really thought about this, but like, of course, especially for folks who are English as a second language, like, of course that's a problem, right? And like, I have unsuccessfully tried to slow it down a little bit, but it's always in the back of my mind now, right? Or like, maybe fewer words better would be the better way to do it.
I think it's just so interesting with casting all around, because like, there's always like the fundamentals and like what's good and what's wrong. Because it's like, I definitely agree, like with the play-by-play, that because you can see that issue in a lot of different games, especially when people are still kind of like learning, or maybe at a tier 3, tier 2 level, we're just reading what's off of the screen. Valorant, it's called like kill feed reading. Somebody gets a kill, you read it off, but you didn't actually explain anything that happened, or like even just state the matter in a way that would have been impactful. Like, there's a lot more of a difference between Kyogre hits the field and sets the rain, in comparison to like Rain getting set next to this Pokemon, this is going to activate this ability, and like explaining like kind of like where the impact is from there, which I think a lot of people like watching don't necessarily appreciate, because I think a lot of the times the play-by-play, like you're talking, and I also the utmost respect, like we're talking about Evan's play-by-play in here, like so amazing, but sometimes play-by-plays get coined as like the dumb caster, because they're stating what's going on through the turn. they're not necessarily there to be like providing the analysis through the turn. I know nowadays, like sometimes the roles get a little bit murky. But it's always then like the color caster that hops in and then is saying all like the analytical, like smart stuff. And like, I feel like that's such a shame, like looking back on like just the play-by-play role in general in Pokemon, because people do such an amazing job at it. And then that's not the audience takeaway for no reason other than the fact that you just don't have two analysis like yapping back and forth the whole time.
Yeah, I've never felt very positively about the chat's ability to understand why broadcasts were good or bad. But yeah, I hate to break it to any viewers, especially anyone who's a fan of my work. The play-by-play job in Pokemon is drastically harder. Again, like there's a reason why it worked in the old days for me to not be very good on the microphone and Evan to carry. It would not have worked if our experience was backwards, right? It would have been a terrible show. I think that, at least in Pokemon, the analysis, well, if you understand the flow of the game pretty well, like, it's pretty easy to fake it most of the time. But like really what my job is just to explain the board state enough that you understand why the players are smart, right? I'm really just doing marketing. Where I think there's a lot more broadcasting skill on the play-by-play side because you have to be more succinct. And it's really easy to either miss important information and like everyone notices when that happens that they don't notice when they don't notice the absence of the error enough. But then also, there's just so many ways you can screw up the broadcast and the play-by-play side where as the analyst, as long as I don't say anything that's objectively untrue, you're going to forget about whatever I said in 35 seconds. Right. And I think I wish more people saw it the way I did it. Because after doing this for, a decade plus now, I don't have the hard job.
I also like color casting in general because like I finally started to do a little bit more color casting. It's so interesting because there's definitely things about this game that are just like objectively true. There's also a lot more like subjective or like different past players can go off of that is also both very viable, right? Like we have all these like different 50-50s we can go down, which then the right answer is more so dependent on what your opponent's picking on that turn. So when you're looking back at like that analysis as well, each analyst in the game could do something very different because realistically it's your own analysis and spin of the situation, which a lot of the times it can be a little bit different because each situation's so different. It's only going to be bad if like the analysis is like, I don't know, oh, this water move is going to do double and sun. If you're just spitting like actually wrong things, then it's bad. But obviously everyone's skilled enough that that's not happening. So beyond there, like it's always just going to be like good across the board. Like it's more of like that flavor more than anything.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because like I agree with you on most turns, and like I'm trying to understand the situations where I don't agree with that because I can't define it. But it's been something I've been trying to figure through kind of like the last couple seasons since I've been back. Where sometimes when I listen to other analysts, like to me, there are certain turns where like there is like a certain mechanic that I think is like really critical of a turn for whatever reason, right? Where it's like, like the game will probably be won or lost, or like a huge advantage will be gained or lost based on what this one mechanic or Pokemon does. And I feel like in those situations when the analyst is talking about anything else, it absolutely drives me insane because to me, it's just like a glowing marker of that Pokemon. Like, no, this is you can't not like mention this. Like especially like if it's like a switch in or something and then it happens and then the analysts like go back and be like, that was a big deal. Like you needed to prep the audience for this. Like it's too late now. We fumbled. And like I think like even I guess like I feel like I have a feeling for it, but I don't have a strong enough understanding to explain it where I couldn't coach it. And like I hope kind of like in the next like stretch of commentary, I want to try to figure out more specifically when I think the situation is. Because like kudos, maybe I'm doing the same things. I'm just catching it because it is, by the way, the audience, a million times easier to analyze the game when you don't have a microphone. You have to talk the whole time.
Oh yeah.
But like, it's, I haven't figured it yet. Maybe I just
like,
get it because I've been doing this forever, or maybe it's just, spectator brain.
It's like calling out the objective moment over the subjective moment, like when it happens. There's not always going to be those objective right moments in a match, or at least like not in that given moment, but it's having the skill to recognize it. And then if there isn't one of those objective moments, then what subjectively you think is just kind of like the best thing.
Yeah, and I think in those situations, you're like, I wish I was a little better at just being a huge ham. It's one thing I really like about Aaron Zhang's commentary game, where like even though usually there's analysis that comes with it, right? I think in the terms like there isn't an obvious move. I think that's a great time to like talk about the stakes of the match a little bit. Just kind of like interject some fun. I've definitely tried to be jokier a little bit more as I've gotten older, right? Where it's like, if whatever I'm going to say like isn't really necessary to your understanding of the match, so I think it's like a great time for fun. And I'm still working on fun. There was no fun in the 2013 version of my casting, so it's a work in progress.
I think to me, like trying to answer your question on like when to be boring and when to ignore certain things and promote others, like it's a delicate balance. And I go back to the Oras days and Primal Groudon, Primal Kyogre. So at least most people had at least one of the two primals on their team, and some silly folks enjoyed having both primals on their team as their two GS Pokemon. And we used to have it with Liberty Garden and early critical hit days and like conversations all the time of like, it's so boring for you to just say that Primordial Sea increases the damage of water moves and also makes fire moves do no damage or whatever. And it's like, well, one, we have an 18-second animation to get through, first of all, that absolutely nothing is happening on the field right now. So we have to say something right now. And two, just because you're Little Timmy, shout out to Scott, you're Little Timmy who's won 5 national championships and Primordial Sea does this, doesn't mean that every viewer in Twitch chat, especially someone just getting into the game, understands how Primordial Sea works. So I think there's a balance between saying it every single time Incineroar comes on the field that Intimidate's going to lower both opponents' attacks by one stage, and not saying it at all. Like maybe you don't say it against a Fluttermane Calyrex, right? Shadow Rider, because the Intimidate doesn't matter. But you still do have to do the boring part of the job sometimes, because there are some people that are just getting into the game and they don't know every single aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the goal from the beginning is to build, right? And yeah, it's if you can't convert those first-time viewers to wanting to tune in again, it's never going to get any bigger. Side. I mean, Raptor Zero.
No. It's like we're diving into like, because I love getting into like the nitty gritty of like the play-by-play. So I'm not meaning to cut you off either on that one. It's like it's the interesting like when it's important versus not. That I think is like the conversation that I think like all of us as a team are growing a lot better with, because it's like if you have move animations to get by, like go ahead. If there's absolutely nothing, there has been like matches where like there's absolutely nothing. Make some jazz noises or something, like I don't know, but like definitely like I know I have fallen into the habit too, like of just trying to get through everything that's kind of like happening, and then I like look back and then it's like this is the second time Incineroar has hit the field. There's no reason, like, the Intimidate was never the important part in this moment, even if it does get an attack drop or whatnot, because something might be switching out. But what's important is the fake out next turn. So it's, like, calling, like, the important part, because I think even too, like, as you're trying to convert new viewers, there is just the information overload that you have to be careful about, because if the Intimidate's not important, well, then all of a sudden, like, they're lost because you're just threw 10 different things at them and you didn't tell them what mattered. So, like, I feel like there's so much of those micro decisions going through that, again, just adds to, like, everything that the play-by-play has to decipher, because you're going through, you're trying to decipher what's important, but also what to relate in that moment. I don't know. It's an art. There's so much to it.
It's an art form, you could argue.
I'm just getting like, I feel like I'm getting the
I
like
thought Scott maybe had a follow up to that, you know.
No,
I saw an approving nod from Scott until Joe Brown spoke up. So I'm just kidding. But...
That's classic. That's my fault.
No, I just didn't know what you're going to keep going. But yeah, I mean, like, agreed fully, right? And like, I think to me, that's the fun of it, right? Where there is no answer key for us to check, right? You know, it's like, just better or worse than we normally do. And maybe the last thing I would add to that kind of line of thought is like, I've pulled it the other direction. I think there's one thing I don't like that I did when I was younger. And like, I think some of this again is, maybe owing to my background a little bit, but like, I think I was too much trying to speak to kind of like hardcore players. And like, I get it. I get why the hardcore players like tend to complain when we do not do that. But like, you understand what's going on already, right? And like, frankly, you probably really don't care what I have to say about what's going on in the match. Where like, I think, the people who are tuning in and like just need a little bit more information, like again, especially need the critical information to like really understand and enjoy the match and understand why the players are so good, right? Where I think the comments I hate the most, even like obviously I think they're mostly come from children. It's like, oh, my level 100 Charizard to crush these people. Like if you're memeing, that's great. Some of the memes are really good, but just like I would hope through the course of our work, we help the audience understand why maybe that's not the case, right? And that these players have done a lot of strategizing and practice in order to like play this game at such a high level, right? And I think that's kind of where I feel like I succeeded or failed, right? If Twitch chat thinks I'm an idiot, but they think the player is a genius, then I did my job.
That's an interesting way of looking at it too. Like obviously like for broadcasting, the most important thing at the end of the day is like we're there to like service the players. Like that's the players, like whether they are doing the genius moments or whether the worst terrestrialization you've ever seen type thing, like you're still kind of like it's still about the player and not you. But yeah, no, that's a interesting way, even if you're the one that like I'm at the end of it. But I want to know though, we're talking about all this commentary stuff. I want to know like kind of going back through your commentary career, because it's been like we're looking back at like the people who've like been here forever doing the commentary. Like there's been so many ups and downs to your Pokemon. Like I want to know like your actual like favorite just like casting moment. It doesn't even need to be for like the gameplay moment, but even just like a moment that was just credible through your career, like the payoff or like something that was like you look back and you're like, wow, this was like the coolest or most impactful casting thing.
I think I have 3.
Top
so
3,
one of it
baby.
Is just, yeah, I think probably in chronological order here. And one is just the very first time we were out there, right? When it's like day 1 of 2013 Worlds, and like again, because I thought we were a year ahead of schedule, right? I think we were really hoping that Pokemon would reach out for the 2014 season. So that we'd kind of fix things in 1 year. I thought was way ahead of schedule. I mean, fixed to pending your thoughts on our casting. But I mean, because of this, I got to do the Rotom game. Yeah, I would hate to not have that over, Aaron. But like, yeah, it was great to feel like we were making a difference, right? And I thought that like hit me hard while it was happening. I mean, sort of the Pachirisu thing, but that's not one of my 3. I think one of them that was big for me was when we announced it was on stream moment, but not casting moment. But when we announced the Sun and Moon GS Cup formats at, I think that was Nashville Worlds.
Yep. Nashville.
I just thought it was a cool thing to get to be on stream for, where it was Jay, Blake, Kate Ison, and I. And like I knew Kay and that team had put a lot of work in to try to get formats that were more fun for the players, and it was kind of just neat to get to be up there with my friends / coworkers and kind of like help them have a big moment, right? Where I think like it was a lot of a normal where like we've cast a million games, right, and like they've all been fun, but like I thought it was just like the human part of it again. I guess it's always kind of been what's fun for me. And then even though I hated it pretty much the whole time we were there, I think Worlds last year in general, right? Where I think I was a little too stressed for a variety of reasons to like have fun while that was happening, really. But I think in retrospect, like if 10-year-old me knew what was going to happen in a little over 20 years, I think I'm pretty happy. So in retrospect, it's nice to get that moment.
I'm happy for you, but I'm also a little bummed that Vancouver 2022 didn't make the cut, because
it was a lot of fun. I mean, definitely my favorite part of that regional was, every time I was off camera, they're just being boat horns, but never while I was on camera. That was.
Well,
that was the event that I missed.
Yeah, shout out.
When you got to come back for the first time, or
yeah. So I literally, I was gonna come hang out anyways, because like Vancouver is like I got $25 train ride up in a great city. So I was going to come hang out. I got a message I think if it was Thursday night or Friday. I think it was Thursday night. It's like, hey, so I know you haven't cast in like 4 years, but we don't have any casters. Can you? Yeah. It's like, no, but sure. So yeah, I was like, I crash coursed the format as well as I could. Like the 48 hours I had before the stream, I had to buy a new suit. I had only had the one out here, and then I not bothered to replace it when Dwee's brother had a wedding. And boy, did I have a good time at that wedding. But my suit did not, and not quite survive the occasion. So I never bothered to replace it. So that was an expensive day for me. But it's fun, right? I think it was good to get back into it. And so I'm happy to be casting again. I think without that weird concurrence, you probably never get stuck with me. So think about the next time you don't mask. But
well, yeah, that's we got a flashback. We have to flashback to the audience. So
we got a flashback to this moment.
It's 2022. We're in the great city of Secaucus, New Jersey. Okay, we have the Secaucus Regional Championships. I think it's the first time I actually saw Sierra in person. I know we were Players Cup 4 together, but that's the first time we met in person, I believe. And we're both working that event. And as we used to do back in the day, after a regional, we'd go out for the staff dinner. And not going to name names, but a certain caster was like, man, my drink tastes weird. I think they gave me something else. And so, of course, because we're all curious human beings, many people tasted that drink to determine if it was the correct drink or not. And you remember
the flavor was COVID.
Yeah, and it was the COVID times, right?
Yeah.
So Vancouver was the next week. And we just get the Monday and Tuesday, just lose 3 casters. Sierra's on her deathbed. Everybody else just can't make it. And it's just me and Daz at this point. Daz also has his arm in a sling because he just broke his arm because at his friend's wedding he fell. So he's only, half a caster on drugs at this point just to numb the pain. And I had never met Scott before. I know we knew each other existed, obviously, right? But we didn't interact or talk on Discord or anything. So I was so nervous going to that weekend. But that Friday night, we went out for some beers, hung out like the boys, the trio, and the rest is history. You know what I mean? We made it through that weekend, no matter, what they say, how it went, how anything happened with the blowhorns and everything. We made it through that weekend. That is an accomplishment.
I'm glad, Scott, you're back from that, but I cried that whole weekend. I was devastated. But I'm glad that it went down the rabbit hole of you being back. So
yeah. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it's funny too. Well, while we're on that region, I just got to comment. I did not understand at the time, I think, quite how unwell poor Adam was. He's a trooper, because it's first of all, I can't imagine. He's starting out in Florida, right? So he's literally flying the distance of the continent. Yep. His busted arm that he can't use. Which I'm sure is just super fun. But yeah, he seemed like he was in a lot of pain. Is that just he couldn't use the arm? He seemed unwell, and
he couldn't get it through a suit jacket. The first time ever we didn't have a suit jacket on the stream because he could not bend his arm to get it through the sleeve. And Katie,
I think he should wear a cloak. He could have like an anime character sort of thing. But yeah, and then I guess the important thing to I mean, there's gotta be something, right? I think the important thing too to remember that caster trio is that Joe Brown is the only one you can trust at weddings, since both Adam and I had greatly disadvantaged ourselves that weekend by our poor wedding behavior, or behavior if you're Adam, of course, with the U.
Behavior, bro. Yeah, that was a fun. I just remember being just super upset about this Vancouver situation too, because first off, I'm out from near the area, so that's my chance to go home and see my family. And then I also, being Canadian, the vaccine, basically we all had to make sure that we were all we had our double vaccinations and we had boosters before we could go out and get an event. And I had a lot of trouble getting my vaccine in Canada. It ended up being a pretty big ordeal. I had to drive to the States to get it just in time for the event. And then I catch COVID at the event. What? Oh man, I was extra upset. All of it was just really? Man. I still joke with that caster. Yeah, remember when you took out everyone before Vancouver? Did you remember that?
Sleeper agent with that drink.
Yeah, you won't believe how much I paid this caster.
Well, the thing is too, because I do want to also say in their defense, because everyone was testing going into the events too. You tested on your own before you traveled. You tested once you got there. It wasn't for a lack of precautions by anybody. But the tests aren't always the most reliable, and you test negative quite a few times. You're gonna believe it, right? So yeah.
No, I mean, it
I was going
happens
to say,
everybody.
I also took a sip to determine the flavor of it, and I'm just built different because I did not get sick. I was able to fly to Vancouver the next week.
This man is a monster.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, yeah, I mean, the sort of thing just happens, right? I think I got it at NAIC that year, right? You know, like, I trying my best to take precautions. I was hiding it backstage the whole time, and I still got, you know, none of us except for Joe are more powerful than viruses.
You're not built
I mean,
different.
I got it once, but just not, you know, I didn't have to beg someone out of retirement to replace me. You know what I mean, Sierra?
Not yet.
Hey,
Not yet.
it worked out though because you're back. Like, I think it's actually so
Exactly.
cool when you're looking back at like VGC, like the casters that like have been a part of this game and the fact that they're still involved, because like you're talking about like casting back with Evan in the day, you're talking about getting your Pokemon, like to be trading you a team beforehand, and like to have like everybody a part of like the casting squad. Like, I don't know, I think that's just really, really cool to hear. Like, y'all are casted then, and then y'all still casted now.
Yeah, I think it's neat now too, where like, you know, it's like, I think we all sort of left the team unintentionally. And like, you know, I'm sure the end is still much nearer than the beginning for all three of us, but like, it's kind of neat to, I think this time around, like, to work with everybody a little bit. And like, once we're actually done, I think we kind of need to like deliberately handed things off a little bit more. Right. And like, you know, it was cool of it. You know, I think Adam got, maybe the sort of exit he was looking for, where I think he certainly earned that working approximately 800 million events since I stopped casting the first time. And I hope everybody kind of like, maybe not quite on that scale, but like, I think, you know, I hope everyone feels good about when, you know, it's over for us, because yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Evan and Dewey in particular, you know, they put a lot of work in over the years, right? So, and you know, it's just good to have them back, right? We've had some good times at the events over the course of the last few years. You know, they're all ladies and gentlemen, of course, but yeah.
Well, it's just cool to bridge the gap, right? To bridge the generations,
To
and it's
nugget
like you're
bridge
able.
the gap. Sorry, keep going.
Oh, there you go. And to nugget bridge the gap, as Sierra would say, and because you have that experience and that wisdom from the early days that you can pass on to newer casters now, where, you know, it's always funny because like Len gets lumped in with you guys because you have known Len for a million years, but you know, he's only been on this was his first full season on the official stream. So it's always like, oh, the old guys like Evan and Scott and Len and Dwee. But like Len is on his run now, like where you guys had your run before and have maintained it. So I think it's so cool that we can have a new caster with someone who's doing this since 2013, and then the next round have, you know, Gabby, who was 2016, and then she's with someone who, you know, like Jake, who got on in 2020, or me that got on in 2020. Like, it's also good continuity for the audience, right? Because it's almost like when a character comes back in the sitcom and the crowd claps, right? Like Scott walks through the doors, oh, hey, what's going on? And like everyone pauses to clap in the sitcom. So like that nostalgia, or just like familiarity, maybe not nostalgia, is good for the viewership too, I think.
Yeah, so I have to do this like 3 years on, 3 years off thing, so once people get sick of me, I can be the returning character again. I can never get like the multi-season contract. Yeah, I mean, I think so. And then, yeah, I mean, I think for me, one thing I think is nice too is just like, it's like continuity and kind of like the storytelling backstage side too. Or like, I have been around for a lot of things going wrong, right? Like occasionally that's helpful, or like, oh, like here's a player who hasn't been in a tournament since, you know, 1864. Like, oh, I kind of remember that time that person was in Top Cut, where like, you know, it's not like useful knowledge. I can't like, I don't think there's anywhere I can use this other than like, you know, occasional random backstage conversations. But you know, once in a while it's nice, right? And I don't know, I guess I'm mostly backstage either way, I guess, or you're stuck with me at iSeeds and Worlds no matter what. But it's nice to be near the broadcast.
Now we are getting close to the end here. Don't want to bring everybody down, but we would be remiss. I did briefly bring up Little Timmy. We'd be remiss to not have a conversation about Little Timmy, whose favorite Pokemon's Charizard and his favorite food is glue. Now, Sierra and I have brought up Little Timmy many times, and I know you're a listener of the pod, but if you haven't listened to every episode, we brought up Little Timmy quite a lot. He's a OHKO hero to us. So I guess my question is, what the hell happened, Scott? What was going on stage at that moment? Because when you watch the video, Daz is dying. You're like holding tears back, trying to remain calm, but you're clearly giggling. It's one of the most hilarious moments we've ever had on a broadcast.
I'm really glad it happened in retrospect. I mean, like, other than like, I should not. I think that joke is a little. I probably wouldn't do that one again. I think the worst part is like it wasn't an ad lib, right? Or like I thought about the joke beforehand, and like it just wasn't that funny in my head. So I thought it's like I feel like I say a lot of things like that, right? Where like it's a weird comment. It's like, oh, haha, funny, and we just move past it, right? And I think if that had happened, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. But like, I didn't like it was a little funnier to him than I meant for it to be. So like he broke, and that broke me, and like probably not like the greatest example of my professionalism. But I in retrospect, I'm really I'm glad that we have that to talk about, right? It's like I kind of came in knowing it was probably going to be Adam's last broadcast, and like I kind of wanted to make it fun and memorable for him. I don't know if that was like the ideal path to achieving that goal, but like I'm glad that we have something from that weekend that we can talk about. Other than that, it was where it was over, right? Where you want to remember the good times, right? And I think the moment of levity is great, even if like maybe it wasn't the most tactful thing I've ever said on camera.
Like the one thing that I'm just happy about, because like as someone who's also just said like a really silly thing, but like it's backfired, and I just like basically just like shot myself in the foot on air. My favorite part of the entire thing is you say the thing, you're vibing, you're chilling, Adam breaks a little bit, and then you're like, careful, bud. Like you weren't the one to just say the
I knew what was going to happen. It's exactly what did. Is that we both lost it, and we can't recover it. It's just like keep it together. It was not together. It was in pieces. It was everywhere. Got all over our clothes. It was not good. But I mean, but it was good, right? Again, right? It's like it doesn't really matter. I probably wouldn't say it a second time. But yeah, I mean, like it's another thing too. I think I've been pushing this more than the old man version of me casting, right? But if we're not having a little fun out there, what are we doing, right? Where it's like it needs to be fun for the audience. If we're not having fun, they're not going to have fun. I should probably work on trying to have brand appropriate fun. But we're doing our best out there.
Hey, Jamal Williams said his friend like Charizard and Groudon, and he's a weenie, so you and an NFL running back have the same wavelength.
Former Detroit Lion Jamal Williams, my hero.
That's right. He also brought up like goodness. One Piece and Naruto and stuff on a Pokemon broadcast.
I must have missed that. I don't think that happened. Yeah. No, I don't think that ever happened.
That again didn't happen. We'll look the other way for that one. But no, that's still there's like a collection of clips that I have when I tell people, like I talk to people about like Pokemon broadcasts, whether it's someone who doesn't watch the broadcast enough or like they're outside of Pokemon, and that's always the first clip I show them. There's a couple goodies. There's a couple more of them, or more so just like someone accidentally kind of like mixing up words. I won't get into detail. Amanda had like an amazing word shuffle that's like probably the most hilarious stage moment of all time. But yeah, the Charizard one's always my favorite, especially just the look on your face after is like you're about to you look like you're about to cry, and Adam's like, and we're gonna go do this, and Adam's back in character. You're gone. Yeah,
I never really fixed it.
It's so good.
Like the whole time I'm off camera during the match, I'm like right on the verge of losing it still. Where, not my best work. Not my best work.
So I think, Joe Brown, this is the perfect time for a question of the week, and I hope you picked a good one.
So I have a good one here. There were a lot of like kind of Mega Evolution questions of Pokemon ZA and stuff. I'm like, I don't know if like Scott wants to talk about that.
Mega Evolutions are ugly. We don't want to talk about that. They're all the same. You just add some more spikes, more fangs, add some wings. Doesn't matter. They're all the same. Keep going.
Okay, so we're not talking about Megas. So this question, the question of the week, Scott, is from Queenie504, and they say, what's your dream region location, and what cities / types of culture would you like to see reflected in it? And now that we finally have a dolphin Pokemon, are there any other animals you'd love to see become Pokemon that haven't been yet? So you want like a Pacific Northwest region? You want a game based in Egypt? You want, like if Scott Glaza becomes the head of Game Freak tomorrow and you're making the next game, where are you locating it?
I mean, if I make it the next game, we are in trouble. I think for me, like if it hadn't happened already, it would have been Hawaii. I think that's definitely the place I've traveled in real life where I think like the animals most kind of took my imagination away. But yeah, I think for me, it's like something like Egypt, like something like Africa. I think it'd be like the research end of that would be tough, but I think just like to get like a meaningfully different climate, right? Where it's like most of the regions that have been that have inspired Pokemon regions are kind of like similar hemisphere or similar latitude, I guess I mean, or specifically Japan. And like, I think, yeah, I just, branching out to the other continents would be interesting where like, I don't know. I'd like to see more based on the regions I know less about in real life. I think in part because it'll be less obvious to me what the inspiration for the Pokemon were, right? Where like, I don't know. I mean, the joke is always like, oh, seal's just a seal, right? But like, hey, if it's an animal I've never seen in real life, you can just make seal. You don't have to think any harder about it. I'm not going to know. And yeah, I don't know. I've kind of always liked learning about real animals through Pokemon where, I'm never quite sure how like accurate it is from like an intent perspective. I was like reading like the Bulbapedia trivia stuff. I was like, oh, maybe it is based on this real animal that apparently exists. And I don't know. I just kind of think it's fun, right? Or hopefully I learned something.
Okay. Javon, do you have a good answer for yours, or am I going next?
So I don't mean to flex here, Scott, but I have correctly predicted the last 3 locations of the last 3 generations of Pokemon. And ever since Gen 6, I was like, oh, it'd be so good if we go to Hawaii next. And we got that. And then I was like, well, we haven't, France was the only time we were in England, or in Europe, excuse me. Maybe we go back to Europe with England. Boom. And I was like, well, we went to England and we went to France. What if we do like a little Spain, Portugal, kind of thing in between? So I'm 3 for 3 right now. I'm on a hot streak. And
where is it
if I was
next?
in charge, I might strike out here. But if I was in charge, I would love if we went to like an old, I don't know which one was the first, the Greek/Roman era with like the gods and Zeus and like you all wore the togas and the cool, like that style, that aesthetic of a game. And so let's say like old Roman times and like the gods of, there's like a new legendary electric Pokemon and like maybe there's a new legendary dark type, he's the Hades, he's the evil guy or whatever. So I would love if we had like a Roman style, an old Greek style type of location or region.
Okay. We'll have to see. Is that like, if you're doing your smart money, like I actually want to know, because you're saying you would strike out. So that's what you're saying you'd like to see.
I know.
What do you think you're gonna see?
I don't. It's so tough, man. Like I should probably say that as my answer because I did go with my heart the last 3 times and I was right. So if the streak comes to an end, I think I still did more than okay with my predictions. I'll accept my defeat if the next generation's not in a Roman times.
All right. I don't really like. Okay, so I got like kind of like 2 different answers for this. Like, first off, just the Canadian pride. I think Canada's cool. I also do think that looking back at just kind of like the black and white map all around, like you could argue the Canada and the States like kind of similar in that sort of stuff. I think Canada is a lot more on like the nature heavy end of things, which actually is pretty reminiscent of then Hoenn for me. So like I feel like a mix between Unova and Hoenn would just be a really cool game, which is I think exactly what a Canada based one would be. Will they ever do it? No, we already had Unova, right? But I just imagine how that would be. You guys hate Hoenn, you hate the water. Canada has, because of all of the water in Canada, all the rivers and lakes and etc. Canada's the 2nd largest country in the world. You take all that away, it's like way down because like, yeah, we got lots of water here. Yeah. So this is personal for me. But no, beyond that, specifically looking on like that same theme of just like really just like beautiful like landscapes, that's kind of what I'm more interested in. I've never really been interested in like the places that are like the big cities. That being said, I just think like some region in Latin America would be really, really cool. I think just like going down there, just seeing the views and like the hikes that people have done and just like the nature out there could make for like a really, really interesting like atmosphere for a game, and obviously very like culture rich all around to where like you'd have a lot for the game.
Latin America is pretty big, Sierra. I'm going to need you to narrow that down a little bit more. There's a lot of land mass here. We got to choose a country. That's the big.
Choose a country.
Yeah.
Why not? Let's do all of them. You keep traveling through
massive
them all.
map. That's a lot of walking. That's a lot of routes to catch Pokemon. You got to choose as a base country. And then maybe you show some other Latin American countries as representation. But where is your house where your mom is staying in the living room? What country is that?
She lives in Canada.
Canada, Latin America.
She lives in Canada, sorry. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Joe, I have a second guess. I was thinking we started this out talking about our shared love of Final Fantasy, and that has led me to the best region inspiration, the moon.
Don't you get me started here, Scott.
Yeah, it's not clear to me what just all Minior. It's still just
old Minior Clefables from the moon.
Okay, we
right?
got something.
Gengar's the shadow, or whatever. All the Ultra Beasts, who knows? They could be on the dark side of the moon. We have no idea. It's dark back there. You're gonna have to discover it with your trusty legendary Pokemon that you get at the beginning of the game that has a quirky personality. And you're gonna go to the dark side of the moon, and you're gonna go catch some new Ultra Beasts too. Oh my god, we could get think of all the crazy stats. I think all the Ultra Beasts have prime numbers or something, and you could do that with a super high HP but super low speed, or the possibilities are endless if we had new Ultra Beasts on the dark side of the moon. I like it.
All right, y'all are rabbit holing right about now. So, all right, next regional game, the Dark Side of the Moon. You've heard it here first, folks. But wrapping this up, Scott, thank you so much for joining us. I want to give you the opportunity as well for any just kind of final words, and for viewers that have heard you on the broadcast but haven't necessarily gone and maybe follow you. Where can they find you?
Kind of nowhere. I guess I'm technically still on X, but I make my one tweet every other event, or social media is the end of the world. So maybe just tune in to stream. Maybe just purchase a wide variety of Pokemon branded products. I don't know. Do whatever you suit you.
Or go to Pokemon.com and they'll see your work all over.
Yeah, I'm not taking credit for any of that.
Pokemon.com/compete. That's where you get our forecast broadcast or whatever.
Once, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. But for real, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you enjoy, your Pokemon work, your Final Fantasy, other summer stuff, and stay cool. And that goes for everyone out there. It has been hot outside, depending on where you're located. It has been nasty. So make sure to drink some water, try and stay cool, and we'll see you next week for our next episode of OHKO. See you soon.